Oh, welcome, welcome to the Old Meeting House. It is such a joy to welcome you all here for this very special show that we have in store for you. Stories for a Winter's Eve, and boy, doesn't it feel like winter today. Brr. Although, right here, you guys are gonna sauna. It is, those of us up here in the front, it's warm. But with all of your joy and love and laughter here, it'll warm this place up. So before we begin, I would just like to, first of all, thank you for coming, and to let you know there'll be two sets, approximately 45 minutes to an hour each. There's going to be a 15-minute intermission, and during that time, we'll get to see the survival of the fittest run down to the parish house where the only two bathrooms are. so there's one bathroom upstairs, one bathroom downstairs. The other thing I should let you know is if there were an emergency and we had to evacuate the building quickly, we have the two exits back here. I would like to say there's also two here, and on the wings, you go that way. But in fact, the other emergency exit is that back window. And it really is an exit. There are steps down from it. So we've never had to use it, only in weddings when the bride comes through the window. It's an unusual fixture of our church, but we love it. So anyways, I'm Catherine Cerulli. I'm one of the members of our fabulous arts committee that brings so many wonderful performances to this space. And we welcome you to join us again and again. And I would like to introduce this tradition for us, 13 years now with Susanna and Patty and Catherine and Mark. We're so blessed. So let's give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. No, it's that awkward, do you clap after that? It's okay. Evening rolls in early way up north here, and the hushed and snowy mountains take your frozen breath away. Oh, bitter cold, and so much has flown away. But winter knows a kindness all its own. A stranger lit a candle in the window, so it shines out on the pathway where so many find their way. some in finest leather, some will beg, many fear. But none will walk alone in the dark, because for all of us was kindled the bright and morning star, whose light pours down on the dirty and the clean. And we all wait through the longest night, we do not wait alone. For into this night will come the light of the bright and the morning star. So gather round you all your friends and family, and reach a hand across the void to someone who has none. And we'll light a little flame, and then we'll sing to the sky. And we will not wait alone in the dark, because for all of us was kindled the bright and morning star, whose light pours down on the dirty and the clean. And we all wait through the longest night, we do not wait alone. For into this night will come the light of the bright and the morning star, whose light pours down on the dirty and the clean. And we all wait through the longest night, we do not wait alone. For into this night will come the light of the bright and the morning star.
That's a good song. We should do that again.
Well, hello, everyone,
Happy Krishnaquanstis
and welcome back.
to Stories
And songs.
and Songs for a Winter's Eve.
I'm Catherine Bloom.
I'm Mark Nash
We've got Patty Casey,
and Susanna Blatchley.
and we're here to bring you an event which started 20 years ago, back when Mark was artistic director at Vermont Stage in Burlington. And he had an idea,
Nay, a vision.
a vision, of offering our community a holiday show with warmth and meaning and emotional impact of the seasonal variety.
But Vermont style, without ghosts of any kind,
But with cider and cookies and twinkly lights
and a deep understanding of the power of good stories well told
and music.
and music well sung, to open our hearts and bring us closer to each other.
And he wanted this event to be an annual tradition, part of the fabric of what helps make the holidays the holidays.
And that's exactly what happened.
People came once, they came again, they brought their friends
Who brought their friends.
and their kids.
And then 13 years ago, Patty got the brilliant idea to bring the show here to the old meeting house.
The best venue ever.
So, 20 years of holiday stories. So much has changed since we started this.
We used to work with Pete Sutherland, who we lost.
We gained Susanna Blatchley,
We used to make jokes about how often you get your car stuck in the snow every winter.
not so much anymore. But the core of this experience remains the same.
Come the darkest days of the year, we want to keep our loved ones close
Our dreams intact.
and our hopes for peace on earth and goodwill among all people shining bright.
So, speaking of shining bright, For our very first show, 20 years ago, Catherine wrote a beautiful Hanukkah story, which actually got picked up by NPR and read on the air by Susan Stamberg for their annual Hanukkah show.
That was a dream come true.
So the second year, I asked if she would put on her thinking cap.
Actually, that would be a thinking yarmulke.
Yes, I asked her to put on her thinking yarmulke and contribute another Hanukkah story. And this was her reply.
Another damn Hanukkah story. When Mark asked me to write another Hanukkah story, my first thought was, oh, crap. Really, I hate Hanukkah. I think it's a totally stupid holiday. Well, not stupid exactly, but a commemorative event which started out minorly significant and slightly sweet, and which got artificially pumped up by soulless advertising executives for the sake of Christmas gifting parody and fourth corner earnings statements. It's kind of like the holiday version of a third-tier boy band. December's in sync. Blech. Plus, honestly, I really liked the first Hanukkah story I wrote, and quite frankly, I didn't think I had anything more to say on the subject. But then I thought, oh, really, Kathy, when have you not had anything to say about anything? I mean, if opinions were inches, I would be a very tall woman indeed. So I commenced to mulling. Okay, Hanukkah. There has got to be something I like about Hanukkah. What do I like about Hanukkah? And the phrase, next year in Jerusalem, pops into my head. And I start ruminating on that, about the metaphors of Holy Land and coming home and cultural, almost cellular longing for place and community and faith in divine promise and eternal covenants. And then I remember that next year in Jerusalem is from Passover, not Hanukkah, thereby revealing the truth that I am a totally bad Jew. It's a good thing we don't have membership cards because mine would certainly be revoked. You know, there might actually be some other bad Jews out here, and in fact, I shouldn't make the assumption that any of you know what Hanukkah is about. So, as a public service for the Hebraically challenged, here is a quickie summary. 165 BC, the land of Israel was controlled by Antiochus IV, the Seleucid king of Syria. Antiochus wanted the Jews to abandon their faith and worship Zeus, the Hugh Hefner of Olympus. The Jews refused. Antiochus responded with a shock and awe campaign in which the temple in Jerusalem was looted, the Jews massacred, and Judaism outlawed. So a Jewish priest, they didn't start calling them rabbis until later, named Mattathias and his sons led a rebellion. And one of his sons, Judah, won the day. He became known as Judah Maccabee, which means Judah the Hammer, which would be a great name for an Israeli rapper. Anyway, the temple was rededicated and a new altar built. Part of temple custom was to always have an olive oil lamp burning, but they only had enough oil to last one night. However, to their great surprise, the oil burned for 8 nights until they could make some more, and ta-da, the miracle of Hanukkah, a word which means dedication and which can be spelled with any number of H's, N's, C's, or K's. So the other problem with writing this story was that at the time Mark placed his request, it was late July. And I was at an artist residency in Hungary trying to work on my one-woman show about fighting global warming and totally failing because it was so freaking hot there that I couldn't even think, much less write a coherent sentence. The heat just handed me my head on a platter. I spent most of my time at the residency hiding in an old wine cellar and staring blankly at my computer. Global warming 1, Kathy 0. And so there I am, absolutely failing to be a creative force for good and healing in the world. I'm sweating it out midsummer in a dark Hungarian basement, and I'm supposed to think about writing a story which takes place in December in Vermont, commemorating a festival of lights? I mean, my creative juices, not to mention all higher cognitive functions, have been sucked completely and utterly dry. I am spiritually and inspirationally desiccated, and I'm supposed to write about the miracle of oil lasting for 8 nights instead of 1? Mark, I said, I love you, but bite me. That's not what I said. I said, Oh, okay. Because for those of you who aren't aware, Mark over here is my husband. And not only that, but he's probably the best husband in the history of husbandom. And he doesn't ask for much. No, that's not true either. He asks for a lot. But the requests are hardly frivolous. He never asks me to iron his shirts, or clean up the cat yerk, or refrain from going off to Hungary for a month when I could just as easily not get any writing done at home. The stuff that Mark asks me for, well, he mostly asks for miracles. For example, he might come to me and say, "So I have this play that I've put in the season at the theater, and to be quite honest, I didn't actually read it first. And while it sounded like a good idea at the time, I don't know how to stage it in the round at Flynn Space, much less know what the play is really about. And I don't think we have the actors for it anyway. And by the way, I have a production meeting in half an hour, so could you please tell me what to do, please?" And I say, "Oh, okay." And I tell him what to do. Sometimes I give him a few different options, maybe 8 options since we're on the whole Hanukkah theme here. Options which I usually pull blind from the dark, abandoned wine cellars of my brain. And I can do this not because I'm a genius. Well, maybe I am a genius, but really, I can do it. I can tell him what to do because he has placed his faith in my ability to provide an answer no matter what. And it's my job to provide an answer. That is our covenant, our miracle, or one of them. And I tell you this not to lord my fabulous marriage over you or anything. I mean, Mark may not ask me to clean up the cat yerk, but he doesn't make any big moves to clean it up either. But I tell you this because of what I believe a miracle is. An unexpected and unlikely moment of success, and how desperately we need them these days. And to remind you that anyone can step up to the miracle plate and hit a homer. It just takes an act of faith and a covenant of love. Well, it's not like it's as easy as it sounds. I mean, the easiest thing is to stop ourselves. No matter how much we care about any given problem at hand, we often just poop out in a moment of despair disguised as realism. Maybe we shouldn't light that oil at all because we only have enough to last for one night, and maybe it's going to get even darker and colder, and maybe we should wait until we're really, really desperate. Or if we're Jewish, we figure, no matter, don't mind us, we'll just sit here in the dark. Or sometimes we fall victim to what I call the "this little light" syndrome, and it goes something like this, and feel free to join in. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Okay, now what? Or we fall prey to my personal favorite. "Oh, wow, look at that problem. I bet I could fix it. I'll just get out my little lamp here, I'll fire it up, I'll shine a little light." But this really is an impossible situation. And don't the bad guys always win in the end anyway? Screw the oil, screw the light. Give me some chocolate, I'm going back to bed. Of course, the whole point here is that it's not about the oil or the light. It's about the miracle, which, like I said, comes from an act of faith and a covenant of love. So here's a story of a miracle. On my way to Hungary, I'd stopped off in London, a place I'd always dreamed about but never visited. I was so excited to be there, to wander around and see the sights and stumble onto the unexpected and ancient corners of the city. The problem was, it was hot. Freakishly hot. One might say global warmingly hot. And I might mention at this point that heat is my Achilles heel. I hate it. I basically turn into morose primordial ooze. I'm trying to fight climate change partly because I love the planet and partly because if it gets any warmer, I am not going to have a very good time. And it was so hot in London that I abandoned my plans to explore the city and I went into the Tate Modern Museum instead. Now, honestly, I don't much like modern art, but the Tate was the closest building with free admission and aggressive air conditioning. Air conditioning in London, which is almost a miracle in itself. And somewhere in the vast recesses of the Tate, I stumbled across a little documentary film about Tirana, Albania. Now, after the departure of Albania's super insane communist regime, Tirana was destroyed in civil unrest. The people were ruined financially in pyramid schemes. The place was a bombed-out disaster zone. It was barely habitable. And the mayor of Tirana, a guy named Edi Rama, who also happened to be a painter, took a look at his dusty, broken, hopeless, beloved metropolis. And what did he do? He started painting giant blocks of color on the sides of buildings. Primary colors. It was like creating a city-sized Mondrian. And it started to change things. He said that the colors weren't dress, they were organs. And they changed the conversations in the street and at the cafes. They changed the level of responsibility that people felt about their home. They changed them from victims into something else. Rama said to go from a city of destiny to a city of choice is in itself a kind of utopia. Edi Rama, in an act of faith, bound by a covenant of love for his city, hit a home run miracle with color. Really, of course, with light. Now, I know the holidays are a lovely, beautiful time. In fact, we should probably do them every year. But I also know that's not the whole story. It can also be a season of tremendous struggle. And I don't know what personal challenges you all are facing, what desecrated temples and oilless lamps and overbearing Zeus-worshiping monarchs you got to deal with. Maybe it's crazy-making family dynamics. Maybe it's financial pressure. Maybe it's the loss of someone dear and beloved. Maybe it's just the difficulty for wishing for peace on earth and goodwill to all when, as my man Bono sings, hear it every Christmas time, but hope and history won't rhyme. Still, I think the miracle to remember, the thought to keep your flame alive, is not the story of the oil, no matter how many miles per gallon it gets. It's the story of Judah the hammer, and Edi the painter, and Joshua the carpenter, for that matter. Not to mention Mark the artistic director, and we need some women in there. How about Wangari the tree planter, and Teresa the nun, and Rosa the seamstress, and all of those people who inspire us because they woke up one morning and took a look at the overwhelming, impossible, no way on earth they could win task facing them, and they said, oh, okay. And even though they were just like you and just like me, they pulled from their hearts a very tiny flame and placed it to an infinitely large wick, and it caught. Maybe not enough to set the whole world ablaze or even win their personal battle, but enough to kindle another heart and another and another. To change things a little, make the world a little better. And it doesn't even really take a whole act of faith or a big formal covenant of love. It just takes a moment of faith, a whisper of love, and 2 words. Oh, okay.
I forgot to mention, if anyone needs any hearing assistance, there are, what do you call them, headphones on the wall out there, and you just put them on and you can adjust it. So. 1, 2, 3, 4. Every night when the sun goes down, I say a blessing upon this town, whether I see the dawn or no. Life has always been touch and go. Life isn't easy in these old hills. You work and you work and you work more still, but then you take a little pleasure in the simple things. Hard work and hope can be a pair of wings in these green mountains, where something's always falling, the rain or the snow or the leaves of gold, as if the ground was calling. Nothing ever stays the same, and change will always call your name. We don't give up when the going gets dark. You might not be the flame, but you can be a spark. There's just no saying what a spark might light. When we stand together, we can light up the night in these green mountains, where something's always falling, the rain or the snow or the leaves of gold, as if the ground was calling. Nothing ever stays the same, and change will always call your name. There's hope in every little thing we do, and our faith in each other's always seen us through. But the greatest of all is that love lives on, the only rock that we can build upon in these green mountains, where something's always falling, the rain or the snow or the leaves of gold, as if the ground was calling. Nothing ever stays the same, and change will always call your name. Change will always call your name.
So the legendary Pete Sutherland, in addition to being a musician, songwriter, teacher, and visual artist, was also just a writer. And the through line of all of his work, no matter the medium, was, I think, the story of home, the story of who we are in our communities and our families, the story of how who we have been created who we are now. And few of his stories capture that vivid sense of personal and collective history better than our next tale, Eggnog.
My great Aunt Grace was short, even for an old person. This was even more true somehow for a boy, so that a boy will always have to point it out eventually. And this is just one reason why some people are quite happy to be shed of boys forever. But my aunt now, she was a lifelong Mainer, several lives worth. She kept a rambling place on a windy hill back where the backyard sloped far, far down to the sandy and thinly forested shore of China Lake, farther than you could run crazily down and huff and puff back if you had a hope of not missing dinner, which you hadn't better. The place had once been a working farm with animals and machinery, along with an Uncle George to run it all. There had apparently been a more vigorous crop of outbuildings, too, including a handsome silo back of the barn. And the big barn itself had not always looked like it was reeling from a sucker punch. But all that was before our time. On one of our first Christmas season visits, when the cheap snow pants finally cut short our backyard adventures, Aunt Grace, standing on her trusty companion of a rubber-topped step stool, craned her neck into a cupboard with tall glass doors and emerged with an armload of faded relics, which she arranged across her large round cherry table as neatly as evidence at a murder trial. My mother, reprising her popular impersonation of a museum guide for the hearing impaired, announced that these were toys and games that children used to amuse themselves with in bygone days. My great aunt nodded slightly, smiled regally, folded her liver-spotted arms, and regarded us pretty much at eye level through her thick spectacles. Warily, we boys eyed this historical display, small wooden dolls with crudely drawn faces and mouse-chewed hair, and board games with faded instructions and frayed edges accompanied by game pieces in little cardboard boxes held together with ancient rubber bands. Eventually, the women folk departed for the kitchen. My brother Bobby was younger than me and infinitely more cynical and mighty generous with it. They never had any kids, he revealed in a nasty whisper worthy of a veteran stage actor. Well, maybe they did, but they're all grown up, I suggested reasonably. Maybe they died, said my youngest brother Mark, a nervous sort in most any unfamiliar surroundings, glancing about as if expecting to catch sight of some undersized and woebegone specters. Yeah, died of boredom, sneered Bobby. Let's go to the outhouse, I offered, just to change the subject. Another thing about visits to China Lake, a thing that always forced us to contemplate the finiteness of our suburban universe, was that though my great-aunt's house boasted indoor plumbing, she maintained an outhouse. Be sure that we never actually used the thing. In fact, we could not imagine that anyone would use it again, despite the fact that along with the fading magazine pictures and the mason jar of dried flowers, there was a full roll of toilet paper on the wall and a bucket of sawdust in the corner and even a candle in a little brass candle holder. But the mere existence of the outhouse was a near limitless source of preteen humor and refired our imaginations each and every time we visited. This was enhanced by the pit beneath this museum piece of a two-holer, which had somehow been excavated to what looked like to be the depth of a small working stone quarry. And so in our imaginations, to successfully complete one's business, there would yield a moment of dark satisfaction generally reserved for bomber pilots on a nighttime raid. Quarrelsome and even sadistic as my brothers and I could be to one another, we were never more united in spirit than in the moments when we could let the Hollywood sound effects fly to accompany the imaginary descent of one another's turds as they hurtled down, down, down. More than one winter visit to the farmhouse on China Lake was close enough to Christmas that a gathering of my mother's clan was planned around it. Though the family was large in farming family tradition, at our gatherings, we generally encountered only a dozen or so, mostly quite old. The entertainment value of these good people to my brothers and I was priceless. There was never any hard evidence to contradict Bobby's theory that our own branch of the family had managed at some point to escape from Oz, soon after which we devolved into a fairly civilized race, while the rest of the tribe was doomed to live out eternity as chattering bumpkins. Aunt Vi usually concocted a good-sized batch of eggnog. It was never clear that she was our aunt, or our mother's, or directly related to anybody present. Nevertheless, Aunt Vi showed up without fail. On her elbow balanced 2 or 3 dozen fresh eggs in at least 3 sizes and colors, and flecked with bits of straw and manure. Her other arm hugged a sloshing, nearly full-gallon jar of raw milk. Once situated in the kitchen, Aunt Vi would set to cracking eggs with gusto. We could always hear her from other parts of the house. She had a big voice for a small person and barked like an old fox at her own jokes, and almost never at yours. Though self-appointed eggnog czar for life, it happened that year that Aunt Vi had suffered some sort of a calamity. Perhaps it was a mild stroke, temporarily removing her from office. She arrived all right, crossed the threshold slowly on the arm of a patient uncle, and resigned herself to a residency in the chair by the stove. As everyone else had their time-honored role to play in the preparation of the feast, there would have been no eggnog, except that Uncle Ralph, normally as tight as a boot camp bedsheet with $1, had taken it into his head to go down to the shop and save and part with a good number of those dollars for several quarts of the commercial alternative in festive cartons. Aunt Vi could not herself even acknowledge the existence of any factory-mixed, chemically enhanced brew posing as eggnog. But soon, little holiday tumblers were lined up on a wicker tea tray, shots were poured and passed, and glasses drained. Though this was the most convivial of moments, no toasts were spoken, no bit of holiday poetry incanted. Likewise, no seconds could be offered or accepted, as that would have bordered on rudeness to Aunt Vi. But child or adult alike, no one could fail to notice that this was a sweeter drink than we were used to, much sweeter. It seemed to invite you back, almost insisting that you have another round. Over the rims of our little shot glasses, my brothers and I covertly eyed the carton of eggnog, abandoned on the shelf, sure to be forgotten in the run-up to dinner. And of course, there were more of them, unopened. The last few minutes in the wait for dinner were interminable, and to a marginally helpful child, always inexplicable. But by and by, we were directed to go wash our hands and present ourselves at the table. The big table was a few leaves bigger for this occasion, but could still not accommodate every eater, and those under 16 were relegated to a wobbly card table some distance away. In decor, ours was a well-meaning attempt to replicate the grown-ups table. There was a small evergreen centerpiece and a little collection of Santa candles. These had been in the family longer than most of the flesh and blood members and had never been lighted. In fact, they had rather round bottoms that prevented them from actually standing up. To even think of lighting one would risk a conflagration. There was also a small, well-polished silver bell that we were quite sure should never be rung, even in an emergency. A blessing was asked, and without further ceremony, the clatter of serving spoon on chafing dish signaled the start of a big meal. The various platters and bowls of meats and gravies, vegetables and relishes eventually began arriving at our little outpost. Our sole dining companion in second class on this day was my cousin Randall, 12 like me and a champion nose picker. Though slim, Randall could be counted on to eat some of everything, ensuring his place in the inner circle of the cook's affections. As he and I were getting up in height, our knees continually bumped the underside of the overcrowded table. It was a bit like trying to eat dinner during a seance. Aunt Vi and Aunt Ellie should sit here, Bobby said matter-of-factly, and shrank pathetically down in his chair. For one potent moment, a tiny old lady, or perhaps a troll. Randall's face split into a grin, never a good look on a boy with a mouthful of sweet potato and jellied cranberry sauce. Mark and I were swept up in this little fantasy as well. There was barely stifled giggling all around. The card table shook ominously. The gravy boat rattled dangerously in its little saucer. The meal progressed. Children's teeth working better and their smaller bellies filling faster than those of the seniors, the interest of the card table grew. The interest of the card table crew in the various holiday dinner items was soon exhausted. Boredom set in. Pies and toppings would not be appearing for a long time. In the stillness, looks were exchanged. looks usually seen in spy movies. One by one, on the pretext of a trip to the bathroom, my brothers and I, and eventually even Randall, left the room, to reappear wearing that sober countenance which adults down through the ages have so often mistranslated as, "I am dwelling guilelessly in the holy temple of my childish thoughts right now," but in fact very clearly states, "I am plainly guilty as hell of something." Not so hard to see on each downy upper lip was the faint but unmistakable trace of an eggnog mustache. It's hard to believe, but we were able to keep this reconnaissance mission going through perhaps 2 rounds apiece before our Uncle Everett, who apparently was not altogether lost in this haze of holiday cheer or overeating, was able to put 2 and 2 together. "You boys fixin' to leave any of that goddamn store-bought brew for later?" he hollered over with no preamble, accompanying this outburst with a hearty slap of the tabletop. It might have been meant good-naturedly enough, but this uncle had spent his best years in the roar of the press room, leaving behind a good portion of his hearing range along with a couple of his fingers. His salvo struck our table full force. Enthralled now to a syrupy sweet opiate, the entire youth contingent jumped as one. As if at our command, the card table and all of its contents jumped with us. On landing, there was a collective gasp when it appeared that miraculously nothing had broken, spilled, or otherwise come to grief. This moment too passed, immediately followed by, and we all plainly heard this, a small crack, and then a rather hideous scraping sound and a much louder collective gasp as one of the table's spindly legs, which perhaps never should have been completely trusted even to bear a hand with pinochle, much less a full-course holiday meal, folded gracefully inward like the leg of a dying water bird. I'm fairly sure that our hands would have reached out, made a sincere grab for a plate, a cup, an ancient ornamental candle, but we also knew, all 4 of us, that to watch the glorious remains of our dinner careening down a steepishly pitched tabletop, the quaint old dishes, the silver, the resolute faces of the wax Santas, all the lovely decorations, the silver bell, which even now remained steadfastly mute, accompanied by the rising chorus of heartfelt shrieks of disbelief from the elderly, this was to come as close to experiencing the last moments of the Titanic as we could ever hope for. This was something we could truly treasure forever. An early Christmas gift indeed. Here in the present, there was a blur of activity swirling around the disaster zone. Our mother and Randall's mother, our Aunt Harriet, nearly collided in their rush to the scene, mops, buckets, towels in hand. Meanwhile, Aunt Grace, calm for presumably having lost more than a few heirloom pieces of dinnerware, established a triage center a few feet away, issuing orders while refusing all entreaties to sit down, dear, for pity's sake. And as for us boys, though we could hardly be blamed directly for the collapse of the table, there was already an unspoken verdict on the faces of our betters, a verdict that it would be useless to appeal. On top of that, there was now slim chance of gorging ourselves on pie anytime soon. It seemed best to find a location some distance from the dining room until our reputations could be healed, or if not healed, at least scab over. We beat a hasty and disorganized retreat down the narrow hallway, which once entering Aunt Grace's former parlor became one of those chasing games that is equal part fox hunt, clown act, lumberjack square dance, operetta. From behind the plush breastworks of a divan and the ramparts of a rocker, we lobbed pillow grenades. Plastic-coated family albums found their calling as shields. Braided rugs rolled under our scuffling sock feet. The stuffy air of the parlor rang with our hoarse, happy chorus, soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone. Throughout this intense exercise, hard on the heels of a large holiday meal. And soon enough, most certainly aided by the several helpings of the store-bought eggnog each of us had managed to down over the last hour, our digestions slid into high gear. double clutching all the way. You could sort of see it in the particular shininess of the sweat on our foreheads. And then you could definitely smell it. And then, well, the air of unfiltered merriment passed, and soon there was a greater interest in holding it in a straight line toward the bathroom. Randall was the first to make this trek and the first to return, and he looked distinctly unrelieved. "Someone's in there," he muttered, "and there's a line." We exchanged uncomfortable looks. A large number of older potential bathroom users on the premises. They'd be taking their sweet time as older people always do, maybe 5 minutes apiece, maybe more. And then the four of us, our intestines signaled frantically as our unspoken thoughts converged. This was serious. What then? A pitched battle to be first in line? Would there be survivors? And what condition would they be in? "Well," Bobby sneered, glad as ever to have the floor, "I guess we'll be using the outhouse, won't we, boys?" The outhouse? The place had been many things to us, a museum, a movie set, a comedy club. He had to be joking. In our current state of distress, any of us could accomplish his business in no time, but it was a cold December day, and it would take even less time than that for a boy to freeze his ass off out there, or maybe other parts he was particularly attached to. But did we have a choice? The quick march through the house took us past the increasingly popular bathroom, past the door to the dining room where no trace of the collapsed card table or the mess it had made remained, out the kitchen door and into the breezeway. And breezy it was, the shock of the winter air borne on gusts of wind, blowing hard off China Lake, penetrating our shirt sleeves and sock feet instantly. Increasing urgency and an unspoken bond of misery drove all four of us through the rickety old door like cattle. The wind slackened immeasurably, but the venerable two-holder was barely large enough to accommodate us. Now what? Bobby and Mark, roommates back home and accustomed to having to do things in tandem, eased themselves aboard the twin openings. Bobby, for once, was all business, eyes tight shut as if meditating. As for Mark, well, there was no way for each of us in his turn not to be aware of that great chasm below us, but poor Mark, the smallest, was perhaps visualizing his small body contracting in the cold, shrinking enough to slide through the hole with nothing to stop him. Eyes wide, he gripped the sides with chapped hands like an Arctic explorer adrift on an ice floe. Several painful moments later, my brothers scampered for the warmth of the house, and my cousin and I took their places. It was truly unnerving to feel the cold air rising rudely into us from below. The utter strangeness, not to mention the shame after all the joking of being forced to make use of this unbelievably rustic option for this most basic task, was compounded by the embarrassment of finding ourselves doing it practically cheek to cheek. Each of us stared at the sawdust bucket, the dried flower arrangement, anywhere but at each other. I gazed at the rough, knot-holed walls. Somehow I had never really noticed all the writing there, not the crude graffiti that you would sometimes see in the lavatory at school. There were names, dates, gentlemanly and even gentlewomanly inscriptions, like diary entries from decades of family use. My family. Randall completed his duties and made a wordless exit. Time seemed to slow down. I was alone for the first time all day. The cold seemed to be coming from somewhere far off, somewhere other than Maine. Perhaps Uncle George's mighty pit was a portal from another dimension, the outhouse a time machine. I stared at that family diary of a wall, and in my head I saw generations of them, my farming forebears shuffling humbly through their hard lives, from dawn to dark in constant movement, from the house to the barn, to the field, to the barn, to the house, stopping every so often for a sojourn here in this humble nook off the breezeway. Never mind the buzzing flies of summer, the chilly winds of winter. For a woman or a man, the young and strong or the elderly and worn down, it had been a way station, a little oasis from life's endless toil. And they had all been here, had all sat proper Aunt Grace and the almost unknown to us Uncle George and their people and visiting friends and numerous hired men smelling of cows, and now me, just one more humble customer. It seemed there were many ways to feel joined, to connect with your people. At the moment, I felt connected, all right, and indeed freezing my tail off. Maybe I should... There was a gentle rapping at the door. "Everything okay in there?" came Uncle Ralph's soft, down-east drawl. How did he? I pried myself from my reverie, and from the worn seat, grateful now beyond words for the homey supplies on hand, worth more than all the wishes in a genie's lamp. When I reached the warm kitchen, a number of pies were lined up on the counter, and the dishing out was just beginning. There was apple and cherry, and the ever-popular pumpkin with Aunt Harriet's homemade whipped cream. There was also a plate of that otherworldly holiday item known as ribbon candy, which if you had a piece of, your teeth would recall for hours, if not days afterward. The tea kettle was whistling. The adults would be having weak coffee or strong tea. Otherwise, there was "Another glass of eggnog?" Uncle Everett hollered. My cousin, slouched in the armchair by the stove, raised his head and gave me a weary look. The brothers were elsewhere, possibly in the parlor, recuperating. "Don't think so," I responded. "How's that again?" my uncle roared. "No, thank you, Uncle Everett," I shouted back politely. Heads turned. A number of adults were looking at me. Were they smiling? Uncle Ralph, Uncle Everett, Aunt Vi, all of them. They probably all knew or guessed everything, but it was against their Yankee nature to say anything. And as for me, I felt sure that I had come in from the outhouse with a nugget of wisdom, maybe a pocketful of nuggets, and I was hoping to sit and catalog them. That was my style, all right. But first, I found a stubby pencil next to the telephone. In a jacket and shoes this time, kneeling on the drafty plywood floor of the now nearly dark outhouse, I found a bare spot on the wall. I used cursive, as most of my ancestors had done, and dated it, then spit on a corner of my handkerchief and rubbed my signature a bit, hoping it might look like it had been there for a spell. I lit the candle in the corner and sat back on my heels. Like many a boy on the threshold of adolescence, the privacy of the bathroom was and would continue to be a place of contemplation, of discovery, of keeping watch on the coming turbulence of young manhood, approaching now with the lusty swagger of a conquering army. For such a lad, the face in the mirror would be a shapeshifter, by turns handsome or gross, some days yawning like a bottomless pit, others flickering bravely like a candle. No mirror in this place, and that was good. There would be loads of days to peer at my changing self, to walk or lope or run ahead to meet whatever was waiting out there. Today was a day to stand still and let the past catch me up.
We thought we would do one of Pete's songs in memory of him to follow that. It's called Ribbon Candy. Don't want no ribbon candy now, no gravy cooling slowly. I just want to watch the neighbors plow, a scene I hold most holy. I saw your angel in the snow, I swear I heard it humming. A little tune we used to know about happy days a-coming. I took my childhood for a ride in Santa Claus pajamas. I saw its shadow smiling wide in the kitchens of my grandma's. Upon this solstice Valentine, I pour my precious fuel in hopes that Perseus and Orion might feel inclined to duel. Snowy hill to spring will be conceding. The last tomato on your sill, it blesses every seedling. Don't want no ribbon candy now, no gravy cooling slowly. Just wanna watch the neighbors plow, a scene I hold most holy.
Are you gonna sing another one?
No.
Oh, no.
You gonna say something?
I think we're. Do I have a line? Yeah.
We hadn't worked this.
Apparently, it's my time to talk again. Oh, it's intermission. So, we're going to take a short break now. As Catherine told you, there are restrooms down the hill in the parish house. And are there any CDs here? Yeah. In the narthex, right out here, there's some CDs from Susanna and Patty for sale, which make great holiday gifts. So, stretch your legs, get a breath of fresh air, and we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
Thank you for coming back in such an orderly fashion. This is a beautiful song that Susanna wrote.
I want to wake at the moment when the sun comes up. Want to drink life straight out of a Dixie cup. I want to feel like $1,000,000. Rest assured that I'm good enough. I want to feel like a kid again. I want to live life like there never was a yesterday. I want to dream dreams big as the Milky Way. I want to give all my love away and ask nothing in return. I want to feel like a kid again. Want to feel like a kid again. I can't seem to reconcile the grown-up part of me with the little child. Sometimes the line between the old and young just disappears. It fades away. And I'm just living for today. Responsibilities.
The sun comes up.
Gotta toe the line. Help feed the family. Sometimes it seems like it's up to me
$1,000,000
to keep it all together.
I'm good enough.
I wanna feel like a kid again. lately in the night.
I wanna live
when I can't sleep.
just for today.
I get a strong longing for all that I used to be. For a time when my heart was
All
free,
my love away,
not cluttered up with worry.
ask nothing in return.
I wanna feel like a kid again. Wanna feel like a kid again. I can't seem to reconcile the grown-up part of me with a little child. Sometimes a line between the old and young just disappears. It fades away. And I'm just living for today.
Thank you. Susanna keeps forgetting that we're doing 2 songs.
Yes, I do.
Well, this is, we've been doing a few, well, we did Pete's, we did a few that I wrote, and Susanna's. This is another one of mine called Dandelion, and it's kind of, it's all cozy and snuggly in here, and it's, you know, wintertime. But we do kind of need to be reminded that summer will be coming back. So this is something that I wrote for a young lady who graduated during COVID. She was homeschooled way out in the middle of nowhere anyway, and then she graduated from high school during COVID. And her mom and dad, she's coming tonight, so I can tell you all this. Keep it among ourselves. Anyway, so she graduated, and her mom and dad wanted a song sung over Zoom for her graduation. And I couldn't find anything I liked well enough, so I wrote this. 1, 2, 3, 4. You blew in on a summer breeze. You put your roots down on this mountainside, bright as the moon on a field of dandelions. You laughed and the clouds all moved aside. Oh, come the wind and rain, and sometimes the shade or sunshine. You might have everything or nothing at all, and either way you're gonna be just fine. If you live your life like a dandelion, bloom wherever you land, sunny and tough, and there's always enough to know the trust wild things understand. shining our light, no matter big or small. So keep your feet right here on the ground. Lift your face straight up to the morning sky. And when the rain comes down, just let it wash you clean. And let the wind blow your troubles right on by. 'Cause you live your life like a dandelion. You bloom wherever you land. You are sunny and tough, and there's always enough to know the trust wild things understand. To know the trust wild things understand.
Thank you.
So welcome back. Our next story, Chapel, by the mighty Vermont author Stephen Kiernan, is at its core a meditation on love, loss, and the indomitable persistence and immense value of librarians. And also love. Did we mention love? Mark.
With a last name like Chapel, Ruth found that people often assumed that she was a religious person. Actually, her faith lay in two things that had nothing to do with church. First was her husband, Doug, who had given her that last name when they married. She sang his praises constantly, with a wink. Everyone knows which one of us is the sticky end of the lollipop. Second was her work at the Brookside Memorial Library, where she somehow knew where every book was at all times. If a card holder came to the front desk and said, "I'm looking for Fahrenheit 451, Margaret, who most often worked the counter, would begin typing the title into the search screen. But Ruth would call out from the cart where she was organizing books for reshelving, "Due back next Tuesday." As Margaret's search delivered the computerized answer, she would smile at the card holder, "Next Tuesday." Years passed. If Ruth's answers occasionally did not come as fast as lightning, the desk staff and the card holders and even the folks over at Circulation would pause, breathless, while she raised her little white-haired head as if puzzled by the silence. Eventually, Margaret would tap a few keys and announce, "It's out and you're third in line. Would you like us to notify you?" The town had stopped paying Ruth Chapel at age 75, but she continued to work Monday through Friday, steady as a clock. What else would I do all day? Besides, someone has to keep the poetry collection in order. It was true. Poetry was always in disarray. Whoever came and read a book there invariably put it back in the wrong place. Sometimes, too, staffers would find Ruth in a chair, nose in a volume of poems. "My Doug would love this one," she'd say. One week, she missed Tuesday, and everyone worried. But she was back on Wednesday with Doug at the wheel of her car. "We had a little confusion," he explained. "I'll be dropping her and picking her up from now on." Doug was a real estate lawyer before he retired, prospering from searching titles and managing closings and shaking hundreds of people's hands over the years. As he said, "There is nothing like owning your own home." He had a good 100 pounds on Ruth, so chauffeur duty would hardly tax him. No one, not even Clarence Buxton, the library's director of technical services, had the nerve to tell her to just stay home. But those silences where she had once been so quick, they hurt a little. When a high schooler told Margaret she had to write a paper on pied beauty, Ruth straightened from the water fountain to proclaim, glory be to God for dappled things, for skies couple-colored as a brindled cow, for rose motes all in stipple on a trout that swim, for Finch's wings, Clarence Buxton whisper prompted from his desk. Finch's wings. Ruth did not hear, or if she heard, she did not remember. Meanwhile, construction on the long-planned library expansion began, putting everything in a muddle. Shelves moved, returns box relocated, and the poetry collection as disorganized as a battalion of kittens. Then one sunny Monday in June, Ruth sat herself down right in the middle of the aisles. When Margaret rushed forward to ask if she was all right, Ruth squinted at her. Is today my birthday? How old am I? It was not dementia, Doug told the staff at the closing hour that Friday. Tumor, he said, his forehead creased like a sidewalk crack. We're going to keep her comfortable. Margaret thought she heard Clarence Buxton snuffle, but when she looked, his face wore its habitual blank expression. She dabbed at her eyes with the hanky she always kept tucked up the wrist of her dress sleeve. But life gets busy for people, what with construction mayhem and keeping the project under budget on the one hand, and a woman becoming too frail to climb the stairs, so she needed a bed in the living room on the other. Suddenly it was December, and Ruth slept almost all the time. But Doug had a surprise. It took some doing, conspiring with the hospice nurse so Ruth had enough pain medicine to avoid discomfort, but not so much that she was sleepy or unaware. By then she weighed less than 90 pounds, which made her easy to shift from bed to wheelchair, but harder to dress in clothes appropriate for being in public. Still, he was determined. Where are we going? He asked himself on Ruth's behalf, while she stared at him fixedly and he worked the last shoe onto her foot. To see something special. He rolled her out to the car, shifting her from wheelchair to car seat, from restraint harness to seatbelt. Folding the chair, he heaved it into the trunk and hurried around to his side. See, he said, I wasn't gone long, was I? Ruth's head lolled at him, and she did not speak. That's all right, love, he said, patting her hand. Save your words, I know. Driving slowly, it took some time to arrive at the library. A light snow was falling. The last of the construction debris lay scattered on the frozen ground. As he settled her into the chair again, Doug noticed the sound of carolers up the street. Joy to the world, he informed his wife. With the project not yet complete, there was no ramp. He tried pulling her up the steps backward, but he wasn't strong enough. Doug looked inside where he could see Margaret and Clarence Buxton conversing, but he remained outside. Can't leave you alone out here, can I? Ruth's hands were folded in her lap. She raised one, but let it drop onto the blanket again. I know, love, I know. Tilting the wheelchair back, he gave the stairs one more try. The handles were too low for him to use his weight, but he made a hard yank and the wheels cleared the first step. Planting both feet, he did another yank, grunting, and she was up on the level of the entry. Goodness, Doug said, a hand on his chest. Who knew this would be such an adventure? Perhaps she nodded in reply, but he was not sure. 2 raps of his knuckle on the glass, and they were inside with the warmth and the lights. Ah, I'm so glad you could come, Margaret was saying, her arms open wide. We're not supposed to show anyone till January 2nd. Clarence Buxton stood with his arms crossed. The library board, they made an exception. Kind of them, Doug said. Shall we have the tour? With that, the 4 of them entered the library addition. Drop cloths covered the floor from the last of the painting, and most of the bookshelves were empty. These are on wheels, Margaret explained, so we can move them when the after-school crowd arrives. Over here, we'll have the children's chess club. That row of desks will have laptops for our Girls Who Code program. Girls Who Code, Doug marveled. What a world. Ruth remained silent, but her head periscoped in every direction, taking it all in. There's one more place we want to show you, Margaret said, leading the way. Please do. Doug kept the wheelchair close on her heels. They entered an alcove with a high, domed ceiling. Except for one large window, its walls were lined with shelves, all the books already in place. 2 overstuffed chairs, comfortable looking, angled away from each other to give both occupants their privacy. This is our new poetry room, Margaret said. Ruth looked around herself, and Doug leaned forward to watch. Yes, her eyes were shining. She understood. He knew that she understood. Notice the letters. Clarence Buxton pointed at the large A and B and C and so on. Maybe the unwashed will put things back properly now. The room was funded by a special donor, Margaret continued. The only requirement was that it would be called chapel. Not the chapel, Clarence Buxton interjected, which would be more correct. Just chapel, Margaret repeated with some firmness. Now Doug was squatting beside the wheelchair. Do you like it, love? Is it all right? Ruth took a deep breath, a kind of stutter to her inhale, and then she rested her hand on his face. Earth's the right place, she said, her voice feeble and thin. Clearing her throat, she tried again. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. That's Robert Frost, Clarence Buxton announced, from Birch's. It sure is, Doug said. He straightened, his knees cracking. He was smiling, but with his lips clenched tight. Thank you so much for the tour. We'll need to be going now. In the lobby, Margaret bent low to say goodbye to Ruth. Thank you for teaching me everything, she said, her face bright. Thank you. She remained with Clarence Buxton as the couple went out the door. Did you notice, he said, how I knew the Frost line? Earth's the right place for love? I did, Clarence, Margaret answered. Yes, I did. While they stood at the door, they could see Doug struggling with the wheelchair. Without a word, Clarence went out and touched Doug's elbow. As he stepped aside, Clarence lowered the chair, one smooth downward step after another, and then he insisted on wheeling the chair out to the car for them. Margaret stood at the window, her hands clasped as if in prayer, while she watched the three of them move down the walk into the darkness, till all that she could see was falling snow.
I'll be the moon in all your windows. I'll be your star that never moves. And when the firelight dances in your eyes, I'll be there. I'll be there. I'll give you all my light. I'll give you all my light. But it bright we shine. When I give you all my life. I'll be the light in your dark corners, the tender dawn that brings your day. And when you're lost, I will be the lamp that guides your way and lights your way. I'll give you all my light. I'll give you all my light. But it is such a mystery how bright we shine when I give you all my such a mystery how bright we shine when I give you all my light.
Our last story tonight has been brought back by popular demand. Perfect Crime by our own Patty Casey is partly a story about parenthood, partly a story about adulthood, partly a story about Patty having a really overactive imagination. But mostly it is a Christmas Valentine to a wonderful community.
Thank you again, officer. Really, we're just so grateful for all your help. The stakeout, especially, that was just above and beyond. I can't thank you enough. Okay, tell everyone at the station happy holidays from us. I hung up the phone and smiled. Well, thanking the police for conducting a stakeout on my behalf wasn't anything I ever expected to do. Never mind the day before Christmas. It happened a few years back during one of those really warm winters we've had. Remember the year it was in the 60s on Christmas Day and some of us worked in our gardens? One of our neighbors had a cookout. People made the usual dumb jokes about climate change being not all that bad, come to think of it, and I told the one about the happy frog enjoying the beginning of his warm bath in a pot on the stove. In our own little bit of amphibian denial, we hadn't even put away our bikes at the beginning of December. We'd sort of raked around them and left them there, supposedly to hop on for a quick trip to the grocery store. My kid was, in fact, still using his to meet friends downtown so they could stand in a 12-year-old boy clump in front of the city hall and exchange misinformation on adult topics while still managing to look bored. The real reason the bikes still line the driveway, though, was that wrestling them down our basement stairs for winter storage is something both grown-ups in the house secretly wait for the other grown-up to do. As long as it wasn't really winter yet, we could still pretend to be using them, thereby allowing for the possibility that the other grown-up would finally give in, plunging and bouncing the bikes down the steep stairs. As long as I'm being honest, and I am relying on a certain level of trust here, people, I can divulge that we, like so many families we know, don't lock our doors. We bought our house nearly 20 years ago, and I'm certain at that time we must have been given keys. Damned if I know where they got to. This is Vermont still, after all. Which is why we were so shocked to realize a couple weeks before Christmas that the kid's bike was missing. There were our two along the driveway, but his was nowhere to be seen. We brought this up. Where's your bike? Did you leave it at school? No. Okay, where is it? I don't know. When was the last time you saw it? While ago? I closed my eyes in silent prayer. Dear God, please send a pair of wings on which my patience might return. But okay, here was a teachable moment. 1, bad things can happen, even here. People might steal from you. 2, here's how you handle it when bad things happen. You can go to the police. Well, if it's missing, we should let the police know it's been stolen and file a report. Otherwise, it'll just be gone. It was a decent bike, not new, but probably expensive once, from the bike swap that happens every year in town. It came with a little side view mirror, like a tiny replica of one you'd see on an old car, round and dull, but functional. It had given me a small, desperate, feeble sense of hope that it might keep him safer. Anyway, I didn't have the stomach for it. The trip to the police department, the boring, detailed description of the old bike, everyone's memory of its appearance slightly different, the painful attempts to remember the last time we saw it, in the driveway, unlocked, almost asking to be taken. So instead, I offered to wrestle the remaining bikes downstairs. Off they went to report the crime. The police kindly took down the information and said they'd let us know if they found it, and we really should lock up our bikes, blah, 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 blah. Christmas was on a Sunday that year. I remember because my husband and I were walking to a rare outdoor winter farmers market, scrabbled together at the last minute because the weather was actually nicer than many of the summer market days. It was Saturday, Christmas Eve, when we spied it. In from a distance, there was no mistaking its beat-up red canvas bag dangling from the handlebars with zip ties, and the helmet humped over the seat. We froze at the sight of it across the street, pulled up in front of Our Daily Grind coffee house, as if someone had just parked it there and gone in for a maple macchiato latte muffin. The bike, slumped against the doorway, looked almost traitorous. Obviously, it had let some stranger ride it. Otherwise, how could it have gotten there? But someone had stolen this from us. Some monster had walked right up our driveway, just as if he lived there, and taken not just the bike, but the helmet, that hard-shelled yet intimately protective bit of apparel, and put it on their own big fat robber head. It all of a sudden felt contaminated, and somehow like evidence instead of my kid's bike. I'm not sure if all the crime shows I've watched make me the way I am. Or maybe I'm just predisposed to assuming the role of lead investigator at the crime scene. But whichever, I sprang into action. I pulled my baseball cap down low, slipped on my sunglasses, and yanked my husband into a doorway. "Get in here," I hissed. "We need to leave space so the perp doesn't know we're waiting for him." Perp? I think he's gonna come back, and we're gonna be here when he does, and we're gonna nab him. I don't think nabbing him is a good idea. We should split up. You sit on the bench and look like a tourist. I'm gonna case the block. In that moment, and I do know there's a big life lesson in here somewhere, maybe even a sermon, suddenly, everyone looked different to me, as if I had put on thief glasses. People walking by stopped being ordinary people and became possible suspects. Some a little more possible than others. The old lady that works at Rite Aid, pottering along with her tote bag of kale and gourds from the farmer's market? Maybe her not so much, but I still couldn't rule her out. A couple teenage boys I didn't recognize. Maybe they'd taken the bike and ridden double downtown, and now they were splitting custody in some dark, villainous version of a car share. But they sauntered past without glancing at it, as did a young man carrying a cello case. He seemed an unlikely felon. But in my darkest of hearts, I could see Even him stealing my kid's bike and ferrying his cello around like an ant on wheels carrying a giant beetle on his back. As we waited, wave after wave of onesie and twosie suspects strolled by. Small groups, faces upturned to catch the bizarrely warm winter sun, eating, smiling, sweetly and naively ignorant that they were being scrutinized as potential criminals. Finally, I joined my husband, the tourist, on his bench. Half an hour later, the bike still sagged against the doorway of the grind. Maybe the perp worked there. I started across the street to ask the manager if anyone rode their bike to work. Maybe someone who just got a bike? Do you think that's a good idea? My husband called out. I mean, what if he's in there? Then what are you going to do? I was annoyed that my husband was asking such sensible, answerless questions. I was running this pesky thought through my mental library of TV crime shows for a snappy answer when I saw the town police cruiser slowly round the corner. You're right, I said. If the perp comes back and fled on foot, he might get away. It might be time to bring in a uniform. I flagged down the officer and explained our situation, keeping my voice calm and reserved and saying things like, we've positively ID'd the bike, and he's got to come back sometime. Okay. And I was just about to go ask at the grind if someone rode it in today. The officer looked dubious. Probably not a good idea. We don't want any kind of confrontation. I tell you what, I can park at the end of the block there and wait for a bit. I'll call the other officer and have her set up at the other end of the block. That way, if he runs, we can catch him. Even as far gone as I was into my own crime drama, I was surprised at the officer. Maybe he was bored? I guess a bike theft was as good an excuse as any for a police stakeout in our little town. Anyway, now that we had backup, I felt better. It was just a matter of time. We sat like spiders, waiting for a fly to land in our perfect web. I slunk from doorway to doorway, never taking my eyes off the bike and the people approaching and walking past. I was certain one of them would walk up and sling a leg over it nonchalantly, having had 2 weeks to settle into a feeling of ownership. Of course this is my bike. I've had it for weeks. Plus, we'd been waiting there across the street for frickin' ever. They had to come back soon. It was getting late. Didn't they want to get their stolen bike home before dark? More people. No one interested in the bike. When 2 men stopped in front of it to chat, I leapt to my feet, certain that one would turn and take the bike. They finally hugged, clapped each other on the back, and headed off in different directions, both completely bikeless. Even I was getting a teensy bit bored by the time the officer got out of his car. Well, I think we're going to have to move on here. His kind face held a look like you might give a 5-year-old when you tell them it's time to put the crayons away. Really? Okay. How should we proceed? A flicker of a smile. I'd say, don't approach anyone who takes the bike. Just get a good description and let us know. We'll follow up. Okay. Thank you. My heart sank. Without a stakeout, it didn't feel like a crime scene anymore. Just felt like waiting on the side of the road for AAA to arrive after you locked your keys in the car when you got out to pee. I looked at my husband. We had nothing from the farmer's market to add to Christmas dinner, and now the market was over. We'd been gone from home 2 hours. I was still wearing my thief glasses, but now I felt irritable and thwarted. Well, I guess we should let the kid know we're heading back home. Do you want me to call him? I wasn't exactly feeling the Christmas magic. Yeah, go ahead. I'll get his bike. We started across the street for the bike. The bike, yes. Justice, no. But at least I had good news to deliver if the kid answered his phone. That perhaps would be a bona fide Christmas miracle in itself, him actually answering his phone once he saw that it was his mother calling. Hey, we found your bike downtown. We're on our way home with it. It was in front of our daily grind. Someone just left it there. Over the phone, I could hear the blood drain from his face. It wasn't so much silence on the other end of it was the sound of maybe every bike in the universe being sucked into a black hole. A great cosmic gasp, and then a tiny, oh no, that could have been mistaken for a clearing throat. Honey? I think I may have left my bike there a while ago. I'm just remembering. This information landed somewhere in my brain with the weight of a Christmas ham hitting the floor. The past 2 hours, the tense waiting, my near instant transition into universal suspicion that lingered like a hangover, the stakeout. But the sound of his voice, small and terrified in my phone, caused my thief glasses to fall off and my lead investigator role to shrivel away. There was nothing left but Mom. Oh, honey, it's okay. The important thing is we got your bike back and it wasn't stolen. We live in such a good town, right? We're on our way home. I'll call the police and let them know to stop looking for it. I'm sorry. There's a gap here in the story. That's okay. I'll call the police and let them know to stop looking for it, letting them know that it had, in fact, been leaning in the exact same position on Main Street, unlocked for nearly 2 weeks. Nope, definitely not stolen. No, what was really remarkable was that someone had lovingly hung a small crystal ornament from the handlebars beneath the battered red bag with a tiny note reading, "Great bike weather we're having, isn't it? Happy holidays."
And said kid is going to be at the show tonight, so I'm going to absolutely embarrass him. Let's see.
I got a bicycle, I got it for my birthday. It takes me everywhere I want to go. It's shiny and silver with a white wicker basket. I can't wait to show it off to all my friends. When I get home from school, I get on my bicycle. I ride it in circles and never get tired. When I wake in the morning, it's the first thing I think of, the last thing I see when I turn out the light. 'Cause I feel happy when the wind's at my back and I'm going as fast as I can. I feel so alive. I can't feel sad when the wind's at my back and I'm going so fast that the only thing I can feel is the spin on my bicycle. I ride my bicycle in all kinds of weather, no matter the day or what season I'm in. I don't mind the snow and I love it when the rain brings the promise of puddles and getting soaked to the skin. But the best times of all are the long summer evenings when the air smells like sugar, butter, and grass. I race past the houses, forests, and the meadows, and I wish that this moment would last forever. 'Cause I feel happy when the wind's at my back and I'm going as fast as I can. I feel so alive. I can't was 16 years old when I outgrew my bicycle. The paint had worn off and the basket was frayed. It sold at a yard sale for less than $1. I had to turn from the window when they took it away. Now it's many years later and I'm driving down the highway when a flash of bright silver catches my eye. I see a girl on a bike with a white wicker basket. I feel that old thrill start to rise inside, 'cause I feel happy. The wind's at my back and I'm going as fast as I can. I feel so alive. I can't feel sad when the wind's at my back and I'm going so fast that the only thing I can feel is the spin of my bicycle. I feel happy and the wind's at my back and I'm going so fast that the only thing I can feel is the spin of my bicycle wheels. My bicycle wheels. Bicycle wheels.
Let's see, so we're about to finish up. But before we do, we want to thank a few folks for making this evening possible. Catherine Cerulli for promotional support and spectacular culinary offerings. She makes us this amazing dinner every year.
Catherine Harris for organizational support and handling ticket sales.
Alan Plouffe and all the incredible trustees for setting up the stage and keeping the fires alive and burning brightly at the old meeting house.
Will Forrest for helping get the word out and carrying heavy things.
And of course, thanks to you for being here tonight and sharing this special event with us. We hope to see you back again next year.
So we always close with May Sarton's 1937 New Year greeting as a way to approach the next 12 months with integrity and hope, active hope, as Joanna Macy would say, an honest assessment of our path ahead, and a clear-eyed belief in our capacity to face challenges with courage, devotion, determination, and firmly rooted resilience. And also, perhaps in the case of the next few years, firmly rooted resistance.
Much as in 1937 or 2024, we never know what our lives will bring or what resources we'll need to draw upon to get through tough times.
But we do know that we are, at our best, beings capable of unconditional love and infinite kindness. And we will bring our whole selves to the world in all ways, however we are called to serve.
The earth feels old tonight, and we who live and stand on the cold rim face a new year.
It is raining everywhere, as if the rain were mercy, as if the rain were peace, peace falling on our hair.
Open your hearts tonight. Let them burn. Let them light a way in the dark.
Let them one by one affirm there is hope for a staff. I say it will flower in our hands. We shall go garlanded.
There is the fine, fresh stuff of faith for a coat. We shall go warm.
We shall go on by the light of our hearts. We shall burn mightily in the new year. We shall go on together. Oh, you who stand alone on the rim of the earth and are cold, I salute you here.
Dona nobis pacem pacem. Dona nobis pacem. Dona nobis pacem pacem. Dona nobis pacem.
everyone.
Stay safe, stay warm.
See you next year.
Thank you.
Safe travels home.